Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time for Tuesday, September the 15th. There does seem to be hopeful signs that the smoke is thinning a little bit here. So that is a good thing. I had someone contact me recently who's interested to come join in our upcoming annual Woodchuckers Ball, which would be the only gathering on site here that we've had this year for people to come together and help with a little bit of the work. In this particular instance, help moving and stacking firewood for a couple of winters. We have a truck and a trailer lined up, and we need many hands to make it light work. So if you are free from illness and free from any high risk of giving or catching COVID, then it would be nice to have up to 10 or 12 people is what we typically have. If we have that many coming on either the Saturday or the Sunday, we probably break people up into two groups to keep everything relatively safe. And we'll start at noon and go till 2 o'clock, although in previous years, we oftentimes get more than we need to get done sooner than that. And then there's a chance to have a cool glass of water or a warm glass of tea or coffee, depending on what the weather looks like that day. This will be the last weekend of September. And to have some friendly conversation, or people can ask questions. So I don't have the dates in front of me, but I believe it is on our website, pacifichermitage.org. So please check that. It should be the top post right now. My throat's still a little bit raw from the smoke, but I was surprised at how well things went with the chanting this morning. It felt rather good. Chanting especially good, I would say. As I've mentioned before, oftentimes when I'm just meditating by myself in my hut, I don't do chanting. So the live stream and meeting together with Venerable Rakito in the morning gives the opportunity to do some chanting. And in particular, what I was feeling this morning, both in the doing and also the after effects, was just some positive change in my energy levels and even kind of clarity for my mind. And chanting can be a really skillful way to prepare the mind for meditation, especially when one has some training and maybe has memorized the chant, so it's not too much of a chore, and one can really just focus on the vibration and the breathing and the sound, and if you're doing it in a group, connecting and harmonizing with others. We, for various reasons, are doing our chanting at the end of our morning meditation, but the typical pattern is to do chanting before we meditate in the monastery. Usually for about 15 or 20 minutes, but in Thailand, oftentimes for much longer, typically about an hour, both in the morning and in the evening time. And it has many benefits, both personal and social and devotional. But in particular, what I'm thinking of this morning is just the energetic benefit of doing 15 minutes or 20 minutes of devotional chanting. Both the physical energy that arouses and creates in the mind and the body, but also how it acts as a very nice preliminary exercise to start to arouse the kind of energy, the kind of focus and presence and preliminary concentration that can help lay the foundation for more subtle forms of efforting, more subtle forms of meditation. And in particular, aside from the energy, this engine of effective samadhi is the ability to lift the mind and hold the mind. These are the first two jhana factors of vitakka vichara, oftentimes translated initial and sustained thought, or applied and sustained thought. And as we know all too well, the mind is not so good at keeping track of what it wishes to or is supposed to be attending to. And we're oftentimes in our normal waking consciousness failing to select a good object and initiate bringing it to mind and attending to it properly. And maybe even more so, we oftentimes lack the conditions and the strength, the skill, the capacity, maybe even the faith to learn how to really stay with it. So one has the thought to develop loving kindness, or one has the thought to attend to the breath, and you sit down and you arouse mindfulness on the breath, and how long later is it before the mind is lost attending to something else? And very often, totally unaware of what it is that one should be doing, or what it is that one has set off to do and accomplish. So chanting in particular can act as a very nice preliminary sort of meditation. It's varied and it's discursive. So, in terms of objects of attention or meditation objects, I would say it's a lot more coarse than something as simple as the breath, or something even as simple as the metta object or the metta wish. But it gives us something that we can really engage in. And, if you have it memorized, then there's a certain amount of attention and energy and motivation to sort of stick with it and keep monitoring that one is remembering things correctly and chanting them. And especially if you're doing it in a group, it also is attending to the person next to you or the chant leader, and there's a lot there. It's certainly a lot more complicated object for meditation than something as simple as the breath. But it's kind of nice. I mean, I used to look forward to meditation. I used to look forward to chanting, especially in a retreat, because, one gets kind of tired of efforting. when we haven't learned how to put forth effort in this way that is kind and gentle and accepting of the conditions. And when one is not yet skilled in efforting, then many, many hours of meditation leaves one weary of coming back to the breath. And I used to kind of really look forward to chanting. It's like, okay, yes, it's more discursive, but also it's something more social and communal, and I could put the book in front of me and just use my memorized capacity for the chant and just practice bringing up the words syllable by syllable and seeing how well I can stick with that and not get lost in distractions or lost thinking about anything outside of that direct experience of chanting. And it creates a good little metric for the mind to see where the mind is at as well, to see how much we might need to arouse extra energy or how extra careful we might need to be to arouse the ability to sort of really discern something kind of clearly. Maybe that you're noticing the mind's kind of fuzzy, or you're noticing the mind is having a hard time staying connected and grounded with the object of meditation. Which in this case is mindfulness of the chanting. So that can be a very nice preliminary. There are others as well that I oftentimes recommend people explore. They can be shorter meditations or reflections that are inspiring to one. They can be some of these nusatis that we've talked about before, like Buddha Nasati, Dhamma Nasati, Sangha Nasati, which might be a more formal way of recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Could be something like the 5 reflections. Could be something like Metta Bhavana. Could be something like walking meditation. And 2 of the most common of the things that are integrated into our monastic schedule are walking meditation and chanting. And it could be really wonderful just to spend 10 or 15 minutes, or to get in the habit of spending 10 or 15 minutes doing some walking meditation before one sits down. It gets things moving in the right direction. A little bit of exercise and get some circulation, and again start to tune into sort of what's going on in the mind and the body, so you get a sense of where the hindrances are, where your strengths and weaknesses are. And then you can use the form of walking meditation to start to correct for that. Start to build some energy, start to build some focus, start to overcome some dullness. And I saw a question from Stan as we were getting the stream kind of going here, and maybe we'll just slide right into that. When the mind won't seem to settle down in meditation, general chatter with no strong emotional charge, which hindrance is this? Restlessness and worry, even if there's no worry? It's restlessness. And overcoming restlessness is probably one of the most difficult sort of challenges. Especially subtle restlessness affects our meditation in quite a kind of profound way. And there are many things that one might do to overcome that stand, but one thing that just kind of comes to mind this morning, sort of reading that, is to stop meditating and go do some mindful movement, or go do some walking meditation. Sometimes just sitting there trying to sort of overcome the restlessness is it's difficult to dispel. And the physicality of chanting or walking, as I've been talking about, sometimes can go a long ways to helping one then settle down. It's like you kind of pull back, you engage in something that's more coarse, but also you're engaging in something that's more physical. So chanting with full breathing can be very physical and yet focused. And walking meditation, we can engage with that in ways that also really help exercise the mind and body in a way that allow us then to come back and pick up seated meditation, and sometimes the restlessness will settle out. And changing postures sometimes even is just effective. It's really difficult just to work out in your mind sometimes. You'll be sitting there and you keep trying to adjust the effort or something, and the restlessness just keeps kind of going. And I'm not a huge fan of being overly wedded to some idea that you need to sit for a certain period of time. I think at some point we need to kind of graduate to dealing with the mind as it is, and especially for yourself, you've been meditating for many years. There's nothing wrong with just changing posture to sort of overcome a hindrance. So sometimes just standing up for a little bit, 5 minutes, doing some breathing, sitting back down, begin again. Sometimes there can be a shift in that. Going out, getting up, going out, doing 15 minutes or 30 minutes of walking meditation, coming back and beginning it again. You might see a change in the restlessness. If you want to try to work with that just mentally, I think my number one recommendation would be try to increase the sense of joy and delight in experiencing the object of meditation. I think a lot of the restlessness that we experience is this kind of dissonance that's generated from the experience of dukkha. Even subtle dukkha is operational there if the hindrances are still influencing the mind. And a common reaction to that is this restless energy of the mind. So sometimes we can just encourage a little bit more joy and delight in the meditation object, and you'll see a change in that restlessness. So that's a more mental way to work with something like that. Okay, welcome back, Sharada. Glad you brought your question back to us today. This is a big one, though. Ajahn, could you talk a bit about what clinging to saññā, saṅkhāra, viññāṇa means and how it causes suffering? Trying to understand the line, the 5 clinging khandhas are dukkha. Well, I remember asking a question like this probably in the first couple months I entered the monastery in Thailand. once a day we would have an early evening cup of tea or coffee in the ground floor of Lumpur Pasano's meditation hut where he lived. And one day I was there, and I probably hadn't been in the monastery more than a few weeks, maybe 2 months. And I was puzzling over the 5 khandhas. And Lumpur Pasano wasn't there that day. The vice abbot was there. And I quite innocently sort of asked about how it is to tease out sort of like the differences between saññā and saṅkhāra and viññāṇa, and how actually they lead to dukkha. And the vice abbot sort of kind of smirked and said, well, that's the work of your life here, working out the answer to that. Which elicited a pretty good chuckle from the rest of the room, and I felt sufficiently embarrassed, like I'd asked kind of a bad question or something. But he sort of followed up with a little bit of a kind of warm, encouraging response of, this phrase, the 5 clinging khandhas or dukkha, in some sense, that is a statement that to fully understand, one needs to cultivate the path of practice fully. So this is your life's work as well. This is all of our life's work. If we're students of the Buddha and really want to understand what he means by this word dukkha. Now, the 5 khandhas, and the way I contemplate and conceive of it in the Buddhist teaching, is often used as a shorthand model to sort of examine dukkha in the whole. And you see this in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the very first of the 3 cardinal sutras. A section in there where it's going through in the first noble truth, defining various forms of pain or dukkha. And then that list kind of ends with, in our chanting, the way we translate it is, in short, the 5 khandhas affected by clinging or dukkha. So how it is that we understand and relate to the experience of mind and body, which is further broken down into form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Our relationship to that, how it is that we understand those aspects of mind, absent paññā, absent a full understanding of the 4 noble truths and the 3 characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. Our relationship to those things is one that breeds dukkha. It's the clinging to those, and there's many ways we can unpack that or talk about that. One is like clinging to those as self, clinging to those as a safe refuge, clinging to those as satisfactory, or promising the satisfaction that we long for in life. That's where we go wrong. And especially when we start looking and starting to get a little bit of an understanding of how it is that we practice selfing, or how we keep returning to and framing our experience through the lens of selves and selfing. It's in these different aspects of the khandhas that we often find ourselves clinging to. The various conceptions of who we are and who we're not, who we want to be, who we don't want to be. And that process and habit of identification plays a critical kind of role in the generation of tanha, the desire that leads to dukkha. So like in the Anatta-lakkhana Sutta, we're identified and clinging to body as self. Why? Well, we long for satisfaction. We long for completeness. We long for peace. And the common misguided notion is that this body is self. And there's some desire for the body to be other than it is. To be more pleasant, to be more pleasing, to not get old, to not get sick, to not die, to not have to experience pain. And your question, Sarada, you're talking about three of the aspects that are mentality: saññā, saṅkhāra, viññāṇa. And my understanding is viññāṇa, sort of in this model, is more the faculty that's supporting kind of consciousness. And I haven't really spent a lot of time building contemplations around that. Most of the teachings that speak to me in the suttas when talking about consciousness are really just about the faculty of consciousness that arises with the sense faculty and the objects of the senses. And absent wisdom and liable to avijja tanha, we end up again in relationship to the conscious experience in a way that generates dukkha. We're craving for various consciousnesses and we fear other conscious experiences. The ones that interest me most for contemplation, though, are perception and saṅkhāra, mental formations in particular. Mental formations. And that's emotion and thought. And our relationship to emotion and thought, in particular, trying to find satisfaction in those things, taking those things as more durable and true than they really are or can be. Not just failing to see them as selfless, as ephemeral, as not sure, and as unsatisfactory. Gets us into a whole lot of trouble. So it's a big subject, but for our kind of daily coffee time form and reflection, I think that's probably enough for today to give you a few thoughts. And if you're struggling with it, don't worry, you're in good company. in some sense, it's not just your life's work, it's all of our life's work to really understand that saying in the most satisfactory and complete way. The 5 khandhas affected by clinging are dukkha. Okay, friends, I have to get on to some other work this morning. This is turning out to be a very busy week with lots of calls and meetings and such. So I'll leave it at that for today. And I apologize, I have not been able to track all the conversations and stuff going on in the chat today, but we had a little reflection and 2 very good questions there. So hopefully that's something to stimulate your Dhamma faculty today and give you some inspiration to keep at it. So be well, and I'll see you all tomorrow.